In 1963, a man was demolishing a wall in his home in Derinkuyu, a small town in the Cappadocia region of Turkey, when he found something that would eventually rewrite our understanding of human civilization. Behind that wall was a tunnel, and that tunnel led to another, and that one led to a room, and that room connected to staircases going down, deeper into the volcanic rock beneath his feet. What he had stumbled into wasn't just a basement or a forgotten cellar. It was a fully functioning underground city capable of housing, according to Turkish archaeologists, up to 20,000 people, and some estimates push that number significantly higher, reaching 50,000 when you account for livestock, food storage, and supporting infrastructure. Derinkuyu was not just hidden from governments. For centuries, it was hidden from everyone. It sat beneath a landscape that looked completely unremarkable, beneath fields, beneath homes, beneath a town that people walked through every single day without knowing that an entire civilization had been built below their feet. The Turkish Department of Culture officially opened it for tourism in 1969, 6 years after that accidental discovery. And what archaeologists found during those years of investigation was not something they were prepared for. The city descends approximately 85 meters underground, which is roughly the height of a 28-story building, but going down instead of up. It has 18 levels that have been officially confirmed, though some researchers believe there are more that haven't been fully excavated. It contains ventilation shafts, wells, wine cellars, oil presses, stables, chapels, schools, and a large room that archaeologists believe was used as a missionary school based on its vaulted ceiling design and the barrel-vaulted structure typical of early Christian architecture. There are over 600 entrances from the surface, most of them concealed inside ordinary-looking homes and courtyards, and the entire complex is connected by tunnels wide enough for a person to walk through but narrow enough to force anyone entering to walk single file, which, as we'll explore later, was not an accident. Here's where things get genuinely complicated, and where historians have been fighting for decades. The official academic position, supported by scholars like Dr. Omer Demir, who spent years excavating and studying the site, and authored Cappadocia Cradle of History, is that Derinkuyu was expanded significantly during the Byzantine era, roughly between the 5th and 10th centuries AD, and was used by early Christians to hide from Roman persecution and later from Arab raids. That's the tidy, comfortable explanation. But Derinkuyu wasn't built by the Byzantines. The Byzantines expanded it. The original construction is much older, and this is where academic consensus starts to fracture. The Hittites, who dominated Anatolia from roughly 1600 to 1180 BC, are frequently cited as the original architects. The Hittite Empire was sophisticated, organized, and had clear reasons to build underground shelter systems, given the political volatility of the Bronze Age Near East. Some archaeological evidence, including tools and artifacts recovered from the deepest levels of the site, does suggest pre-Byzantine origins. But there's another layer that fewer academics want to touch. Eric von Daniken brought Derinkuyu to a global audience in his 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, suggesting the construction complexity implied non-human involvement. That framing, predictably, got the site associated with fringe theory in mainstream circles. But what serious researchers like Dr. Andrew Collins, who wrote Göbekli Tepe Genesis of the Gods and has written extensively about underground structures in Turkey, have argued is that there's a legitimate mystery here that doesn't require aliens but does require us to ask harder questions about the technological and organizational capacity of ancient peoples. Collins and others have pointed out that carving 85 meters into volcanic tough rock, creating functional ventilation systems that still work today, engineering water systems that prevented flooding across 18 underground levels, and doing all of this without modern tools or, as far as we know, any written blueprint that has survived, represents an organizational and engineering achievement that doesn't fit neatly into what we thought we knew about these civilizations. Göbekli Tepe, which sits roughly 500 kilometers east and dates to at least 9600 BC, has fundamentally shifted how we think about prehistoric human organization. Derinkuyu may be forcing the same kind of rethinking. If you're finding this as unsettling as I am, good. You should be. And if you want to keep going down this rabbit hole with me, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more underground, literally and figuratively, that we're going to explore together in upcoming videos. Let's talk about the ventilation system, because this is the detail that stops engineers cold when they first encounter it. Derinkuyu has a central ventilation shaft that descends approximately 55 meters and connects to multiple horizontal air channels spread across the various levels. This system moves fresh air to the deepest parts of the city through passive airflow, meaning no mechanical assistance, no fans, no electricity. It just works, based entirely on the pressure differential between the cooler underground air and the warmer surface air above. A 2013 study published in the International Journal of Ventilation analyzed several ancient underground structures, including sites in Cappadocia, and concluded that the passive ventilation engineering demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of thermodynamic principles that would not be formally codified in Western science until the 18th century. The builders didn't have Newton or Bernoulli, but they clearly understood how air behaves. The water system is equally sophisticated. Derinkuyu sits above a complex network of underground springs, and the builders engineered wells that could be sealed from below. This detail is critical and often overlooked. If an enemy force reached the surface wells and attempted to poison the water supply, residents underground could cut off access to those wells from beneath, protecting their water source without exposing themselves. This isn't primitive thinking. This is contingency planning at an institutional level. The doors, which archaeologists have found preserved in several sections of the city, are circular stone slabs weighing between 200 and 500 kilograms. They roll into position to block tunnels and can only be opened or closed from the inside, with a small hole in the center that allowed defenders to use spears against anyone attempting to force entry from the other side. The architectural detail here is a weapons system. This city wasn't just built to hide people, it was built to make those people impossible to kill even if discovered. There are also sophisticated acoustic properties. Sound doesn't carry between levels the way it does in most structures. Researchers who have spent time in the lower levels report that the tunnels seem to absorb sound in a way that would have prevented noise from betraying the presence of residents to anyone walking above on the surface. Whether this was intentional acoustic engineering or a fortunate byproduct of the rock composition is debated. But the effect is real. This is the part that gets humanizing and, honestly, a little heartbreaking. People didn't build Derinkuyu as an exercise in architecture. They built it because they were terrified, or because their leaders understood that terror was coming. And then, apparently, they used it, multiple times across multiple centuries, possibly across multiple civilizations. Food storage analysis from the site, documented by Turkish archaeologists in reports compiled by the General Directorate of Cultural Heritage and Museums, shows evidence of long-term habitation. The wine and oil presses weren't emergency provisions. They suggest agricultural processing that happened underground, on a regular schedule, which means people weren't retreating into the city for days or weeks. They were living in it for extended periods. The livestock areas add another layer to this. Stables capable of housing animals were built into multiple levels. Animals underground require ventilation, they produce heat, waste, and noise. The fact that the engineering accounted for all of this suggests the architects were planning for communities, not survivors. They were planning for society to continue functioning underground the way it functioned above. A Reddit thread from r/History, which gathered attention from several academic historians who commented on the discussion, raised a question that I think is genuinely interesting. One commenter, who identified as a civil engineer, noted that maintaining a population of even 5,000 people underground for weeks at a time would require logistical planning, equivalent to a mid-sized military operation. Food rotation, waste management, psychological management of confined populations, air quality monitoring, social hierarchy to prevent panic and violence. The question posed was, where is the evidence of the administrative structure that would have been required to manage this? That evidence is largely missing. We have the physical infrastructure, we don't have the governance records, we don't have the social documentation, and that gap is one of the most honest mysteries about Derinkuyu, one that isn't filled by conspiracy theories but by genuine archaeological absence. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think is the most unsettling part of this so far, because I've been sitting with this research for weeks, and I still find the water sealing mechanism the thing that gets under my skin the most. A civilization that planned for poisoning attempts is a civilization that had experienced, or seriously expected, a level of warfare we rarely discuss in mainstream history education. Derinkuyu is not alone. It is part of a network. This is where the story escalates beyond one remarkable site into something that suggests a regional, possibly coordinated, underground civilization strategy. Kemakli, located approximately 9 kilometers north of Derinkuyu, is another major underground city in Cappadocia. It has been officially excavated to a depth of 4 levels, though its full extent remains unknown. The Turkish government estimates there are approximately 200 underground cities in the Cappadocia region, of which only a fraction have been fully excavated. The journal Anatolian Studies, published by the British Institute at Ankara, has included multiple papers over the decades documenting newly discovered underground complexes in the region, with a significant 2015 discovery in Nevşehir, revealing what preliminary surveys suggested was larger than Derinkuyu itself. That site is still being excavated. What makes the network theory more than speculation is the confirmed tunnel connecting Derinkuyu to Kemakli. Researchers have documented a passage between the two cities, approximately 9 kilometers long, 9 kilometers underground, connecting two cities, each capable of housing tens of thousands of people. When you stand on the surface and look at the Cappadocian landscape, you are standing on top of what may be the largest underground urban network ever built by human civilization, and we have excavated perhaps 10% of it. Dr. Muammer Ulaturk, an academic affiliated with Nevşehir Hacettepe University, who has published research on Cappadocian underground structures, has argued in lectures and documented interviews that the network was almost certainly coordinated, meaning it wasn't built by independent communities independently deciding to go underground. There was planning, there was communication between communities, and there was a shared threat or shared ideology driving the construction. What that threat was, or whether it was ideological rather than military, remains open. The 2014 Nevşehir discovery made international headlines briefly. The Guardian, The Independent, and several major outlets covered it. The Turkish Housing Development Administration uncovered it accidentally during urban renewal demolition work in the city center. Initial surveys suggested it was massive, with wider tunnels than Derinkuyu, churches carved into the rock, and evidence of large-scale habitation, and then the coverage largely stopped. Not because the discovery was debunked, but because the excavation is ongoing, slow, and doesn't have the photogenic drama of a completed reveal. That's a media problem, not an archaeological one. The city is there. It's real. It's just not fully understood yet. Here's my honest, critical take on all of this, and I want to be transparent that this is opinion, not established academic consensus. We have a tendency, and by we I mean Western academic culture broadly, to treat ancient peoples as less sophisticated versions of ourselves. Smarter than animals, more organized than we once gave them credit for, yes, but fundamentally operating below a threshold of complexity that we associate with modernity. Derinkuyu breaks that model completely, and I think the reason it doesn't get more mainstream attention is precisely because of how thoroughly it breaks that model. Consider the scale of coordinated intention required to build this network. You need to convince tens of thousands of people to contribute labor to projects they may not live to see completed. You need engineering knowledge sophisticated enough to solve passive ventilation and defensive architecture simultaneously. You need agricultural planning capable of sustaining underground communities for extended periods. You need a political or religious authority strong enough to maintain order in a completely enclosed, lightless, confined space where panic would be existentially fatal. This is not primitive behavior. This is state-level organizational capacity expressed by a people we don't have neat historical categories for. What bothers me more is the question of what they were hiding from. Not in a conspiratorial sense, but in a historical honesty sense. The defensive features of Derinkuyu, the one-way doors, the single-file tunnels, the sealable wells, the acoustic insulation, these are not features you build because you're nervous. These are features you build because you have specific knowledge of a specific threat and you are engineering against it with precision. Someone, at some point in history, told these builders exactly what they needed to survive. The builders listened, and they built something that actually worked. The mainstream framing tends to land on Christian persecution and Arab raids as the explanatory context, and that's not wrong. Those communities absolutely used this city. But those events don't fully explain the deepest levels, the oldest artifacts, or the engineering decisions that predate Christian settlement in the region by potentially thousands of years. We are looking at a palimpsest, a document written over many times by different hands, and we keep reading only the most recent layer. The honest intellectual position here is that we don't fully know who built the oldest sections of Derinkuyu. We don't know what specific threat prompted their construction, and we don't know how far the underground network ultimately extends. Those are three enormous unknowns that sit beneath one of the most visited tourist sites in Turkey, a country that receives tens of millions of tourists per year, and they are largely undiscussed in popular culture. If this video changed how you think about what ancient people were capable of, go ahead and hit the like button, because that's actually how channels like this survive and keep making videos about the things that textbooks skip over. And if you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who should be subscribed. Not because I'm asking nicely, but because the next video is going to go even deeper into another place the official record doesn't quite explain. And I think you already know you want to be there for that. Derinkuyu exists. It is open to visitors. The Turkish government has confirmed its scale, its age range, and its engineering sophistication. The academic literature on it is real, accessible, and frankly more fascinating than most popular treatments of the subject. What we should be asking, collectively and loudly, is why a discovery of this magnitude made in 1963 is still treated as a curiosity rather than one of the most important archaeological finds in human history. The city was hidden from governments because governments didn't build it. It was built by people who had decided, for reasons we still don't completely understand, that the surface world could not be trusted. And given what they managed to build underground, maybe they understood something about human civilization that we're still not ready to fully hear.